Captain Deho stretched his tired muscles as he walked across the bridge of the reconnaissance vessel, Silent Hunter. 3 months of deep space patrol through the Outer Rim territories had yielded nothing but empty systems and dead rocks. The Caltharian Empire's expansion had slowed as they ran out of easy targets, and Command was getting impatient for new worlds to conquer. "Captain, we're approaching the next system on the survey list," called out Lieutenant Kyung-min from his station near the massive sensor array. The young officer had joined the fleet straight from the academy, eager to prove himself in the Empire's never-ending quest for new territories. Deho moved to the central command platform, watching as the ship's main display flickered to life. Star charts scrolled past, showing their current position in what the Empire classified as Sector 7739. It was far from the core worlds, in a spiral arm that most considered barely worth exploring. "What do we have?" Deho asked, settling into his command chair. The ship's engines hummed quietly as they dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Immediately, the sensors began their automated sweep of the system. Kyung-min's fingers danced across his control panel, processing the incoming data. "Interesting," Kyung-min muttered. "We have a yellow star appears stable. Several planets in the system, but one stands out." He paused, double-checking his readings. "Third planet from the star. It's in the perfect zone for life." Deho leaned forward in his chair. After weeks of surveying barren worlds and gas giants, finding a potentially habitable planet was exactly what they needed. "Put it on the main screen." The holographic display shimmered and resolved into an image that made several bridge crew members gasp. A beautiful blue-green world rotated slowly before them, white clouds swirling across its surface. Vast oceans reflected the light of its sun, while brown and green landmasses showed clear signs of geological activity. "Magnificent," whispered Communications Officer Hae-jin from her station. She had served on dozens of survey missions, but had never seen a world quite so vibrant. "Initial scans complete, sir," Kyung-min reported, his voice carrying barely contained excitement. "Multiple landmasses, extensive water coverage, and—" He paused, checking his readings again. "Scattered population centers across several continents, no apparent spacefaring capability detected." Deho nodded, already pulling up the standard Imperial protocols on his tactical pad. This was routine by now. Find a primitive world, assess its resources and population, then signal the main conquest fleet. Another easy victory for the Empire, another world to strip of resources and add to their ever-growing territory. "Population estimate?" he asked while making notes. "Approximately 7 billion life forms, sir. They appear to be concentrated in urban centers with significant agricultural development between settlements. Technology level appears to be pre-stellar, possibly early industrial age." "Perfect," Deho said, a slight smile crossing his face. "Standard subjugation protocols, then. Signal the main fleet. We have another easy conquest for the Empire." The bridge crew began their familiar routine. They had done this dozens of times before. Survey a world, catalog its defenses, then call in the war fleet to claim it. Most primitive civilizations surrendered after seeing a few Imperial ships in their sky. Those that didn't rarely lasted more than a few days against the Empire's superior technology. But as the hours passed and the detailed scans continued, something began to feel wrong. Deho couldn't put his finger on it, but his military instincts were starting to sound alarm bells. Chief Scanner Operator Min Ho, a veteran with over 20 years of survey experience, began frowning at his console. He ran the same scans multiple times, each result making his expression more troubled. "Captain," Min Ho called out, his voice uncertain, "I'm detecting some unusual subsurface structures, extensive tunnel networks, heavily reinforced installations. This doesn't match a primitive world." Deho stood up and walked over to Min Ho's station. The detailed scanner readings showed cross-sections of the planet's surface, revealing a complex network of underground facilities that stretched for thousands of kilometers. "Elaborate," Deho commanded, his earlier confidence beginning to waver. Min Ho highlighted sections of his display, showing the underground networks in three-dimensional detail. "Sir, these aren't natural cave systems. They're constructed, heavily reinforced with what appears to be metal and composite materials. Some of these tunnels are large enough to move vehicles through. Maybe they're mining operations, suggested Lieutenant Kyung-min. That's what I thought initially, Minho replied. But look at this. He switched to a different sensor mode, showing energy patterns across the planet's surface and below it. The orbital debris isn't random. It's positioned in defensive patterns around the planet. Daeho studied the readings more carefully. What he had initially dismissed as natural space debris and old asteroid impacts now looked suspiciously like the remains of artificial satellites and space stations. And these energy signatures, Minho continued, his face growing pale as he processed more data. They're not using simple fusion or primitive chemical power. This is something else entirely. The energy output from some of these underground facilities rivals our own Starship reactors. The bridge fell silent, except for the steady hum of the ship's systems. Daeho stared at the peaceful-looking world on the main display, trying to reconcile what his eyes saw with what the sensors were telling him. The planet seemed peaceful enough from orbit, with no visible military installations or weapons platforms, but something about those readings made Daeho's military instincts scream warnings he couldn't yet understand. In 30 years of service to the Empire, he had learned to trust those instincts. They had kept him alive through countless battles and dangerous surveys. Continue detailed scans, he ordered quietly. I want to know everything about this world before we call in the fleet. Something was very wrong with Target 7739, and Daeho was beginning to suspect that this would not be another easy conquest for the Caltharian Empire. Admiral Sung-woo stood on the bridge of his massive flagship Dominator, watching the blue-green planet grow larger through the viewport. Behind him stretched the pride of the Caltharian Empire, 300 warships loaded with enough firepower to glass entire continents. This was supposed to be a routine conquest, another primitive world to add to their growing collection, all. Ships report ready for planetary assault, announced his tactical officer. The fleet had taken standard formation, with heavy cruisers providing orbital support, while smaller vessels prepared to deploy ground forces. Sung-woo nodded, his confidence absolute. In 40 years of military service, he had conquered 67 worlds. Most surrendered the moment they saw Imperial ships in their sky. Those foolish enough to resist were usually defeated within hours. Begin atmospheric entry, he commanded. Deploy the first wave. Thousands of dropships launched from the fleet's belly, their sleek forms cutting through space toward the planet's atmosphere. Each ship carried a full platoon of Caltharian shock troops, equipped with energy weapons and battle armor that had proven unstoppable on countless worlds. Lieutenant. Colonel Jae-sung sat in the lead dropship, checking his weapon one final time. Around him, his soldiers prepared for what should be an easy battle. Their intelligence suggested a primitive civilization with crude chemical weapons and basic communication systems. 2 minutes to surface, called the pilot. The dropships entered, the planet's atmosphere in perfect formation, their shields glowing as they cut through the air. The surface below looked peaceful. Cities sprawled across the landscape, connected by networks of roads and infrastructure that seemed almost quaint compared to Imperial technology. Then the sky exploded. "Incoming missiles!" screamed Hyojin from her communication station aboard the flagship. Her voice cracked with disbelief as her sensors showed thousands of projectiles rising from the planet's surface. "Sir, they're launching everything they have!" What followed shattered every assumption the Caltharians had made about this world. The missiles weren't primitive chemical rockets. They were sophisticated weapons with guidance systems that adjusted their flight paths in real time. Some carried explosive warheads, others released clouds of metal fragments that tore through dropship armor like paper. "Evasive maneuvers," Jae-sung shouted to his pilot as their dropship bucked and rolled through the deadly sky. Through the small viewport, he watched as dozens of other ships exploded in brilliant fireballs, their crews never making it to the surface. But the real shock came when the survivors finally touched down. Jae-sung's dropship crashed into what appeared to be a park in the middle of a massive city. As his dazed soldiers stumbled from the wreckage, they found themselves surrounded by structures that looked nothing like the primitive buildings they had expected. Every window had been reinforced, every rooftop bristled with weapon emplacements, and the streets themselves seemed designed to channel attackers into killing zones. "Move to secure the landing zone," Jae-sung ordered, but his words were drowned out by the thunder of incoming artillery. The humans had started shelling their position before his troops could even form up properly. From hidden positions throughout the city, human forces opened fire with weapons that defied the intelligence reports. These weren't simple chemical projectiles. They were high-velocity rounds that punched through Caltharian battle armor with devastating effect. "Sir, we're taking heavy casualties," reported Sergeant Wu Jin over the communication link. His voice was tight with pain and fear. These humans, and they're fighting like they've been planning this for years. What amazed Jae-sung most was the coordination. Intelligence had suggested this world was divided into competing nations that regularly fought each other. Instead, he found military forces from different regions working together with impossible precision. Human soldiers wearing different uniforms communicated seamlessly, sharing resources and tactical information as if they had trained together for decades. "Command, this is Ground Team Alpha," Jae-sung reported back to the fleet. "We're pinned down in the city center. The enemy is using underground tunnel networks to move troops and supplies. Every building is fortified, every street is a trap." The reality was even worse than his report suggested. As Caltharian forces tried to advance through the city, they discovered that the humans had turned the entire urban environment into a weapon. Buildings were connected by hidden passages, subway tunnels had been converted into military highways, and even the sewers contained weapon caches and communication equipment. "These aren't just soldiers," Jae-sung told his surviving officers, as they huddled in the ruins of what had been a shopping center. "Look around you. Every civilian is armed. I saw children running ammunition to gun positions. The elderly are acting as spotters for their artillery. It's like the entire population has been preparing for this moment, their whole lives." From orbit, Admiral Sung-woo watched the tactical display with growing horror. The green dots representing his forces were disappearing at an alarming rate, while red enemy contacts seemed to appear everywhere at once. "Sir, we're getting reports from all landing zones," called Major Boram from her intelligence station. Her voice carried a note of panic that Sung-woo had never heard before. "The humans somehow anticipated our drop patterns. They've turned our own landing sites against us. Mines, concealed weapons, crossfire positions. It's like they knew exactly where we would land. The humans moved through their cities like they owned every street and building, which of course they did. But more than that, they fought with a tactical sophistication that suggested centuries of warfare experience. Every position was mutually supporting, every retreat led to a prepared fallback position, and every victory the Caltharians achieved turned out to be a trap." "How are they coordinating so effectively?" Sung-woo demanded. "Our intelligence said these nations were enemies." "Unknown, sir," Boram replied, studying the intercepted communications. "But they're sharing information across their entire planet in real time. Different military forces are working together like they're part of the same army. Below, on the surface, Lieutenant Colonel Jae-sung was learning the hard way that the humans had turned warfare into an art form. They used everything, their architecture, their geography, even their weather patterns, as weapons. When Caltharian forces tried to establish a forward base, they found themselves under attack from positions that hadn't existed on their maps, struck by weapons that appeared from hidden bunkers built into the city's very foundations. The most terrifying realization was that the humans were adapting faster than the Caltharians could adjust their tactics. Within hours of first contact, human forces were already countering Imperial strategies that had worked perfectly on dozens of other worlds. This wasn't going to be the easy conquest Admiral Sung-woo had expected. This was going to be a war unlike anything the Caltharian Empire had ever faced. Intelligence Officer Nara had been working without sleep for 72 hours straight. Her eyes were bloodshot, her uniform wrinkled, but the data flowing across her screens had kept her glued to her station. What she was discovering about this planet called Earth was changing everything she thought she knew about warfare. The door to Admiral Sung-woo's command center slid open with a sharp hiss. Nara stumbled inside, clutching a data pad so tightly, her knuckles had turned white. Several senior officers looked up from the tactical displays, showing their forces being systematically destroyed on the planet below. "Admiral, you need to see this immediately," Nara said, her voice shaking. "We've been monitoring their communications around the clock, studying their historical databases, their cultural records." She paused, taking a shaky breath. "Sir, this planet has been at continuous warfare for over 10,000 years. The command center fell silent, except for the steady beep of incoming casualty reports. Admiral Sung-woo turned from the main tactical display, his face grim from watching his invasion force get torn apart by what was supposed to be a primitive civilization. "Explain," he said simply. Nara activated her datapad and connected it to the main holographic display. The peaceful image of Earth was replaced by a timeline that stretched across the entire wall. Red markers filled the display like drops of blood, each one representing a major conflict. "Look at this," Nara said, pointing to the earliest entries. "They started with stone weapons, fighting tribal wars that lasted for generations, but they never stopped. While most species develop agriculture and start focusing on peaceful growth, humans kept fighting." The timeline showed an endless parade of battles, conquests, and wars. Ancient empires rose and fell, each one leaving behind new military innovations and tactics. The red markers grew more frequent as the timeline progressed, conflicts overlapping and spreading across the planet. "They call it the 100 Years' War," Nara continued, highlighting a particularly long red section. "But it actually lasted for 116 years. That's longer than our entire recorded military history. And that was just one conflict on one continent. They were having dozens of other wars at the same time." Captain Dae-ho, who had been reassigned as tactical advisor after his reconnaissance mission, leaned forward to study the data. His face grew pale as he processed the information. "These numbers can't be right," he said. "Are you telling me they had wars that killed millions of their own people?" "Not millions," Nara replied grimly. "Look at these entries marked World. War I and World War II. The first one killed over 17 million people. The second one killed over 70 million. The command center erupted in shocked murmurs. Even the most brutal campaigns in Caltharian history had never approached such casualty numbers. But that's not the worst part," Nara continued. "Look at what they built." The display shifted to show images of massive weapons, bombs that could level entire cities, missiles that could cross continents, submarines that could stay hidden underwater for months. "They've built weapons that can destroy their own planet," she said quietly. "They call them nuclear weapons. They've tested hundreds of them, and they still have thousands ready to launch. They could end all life on their world within hours. If they wanted to." Admiral Sung-woo stared at the display in disbelief. "You're telling me we invaded a world that treats galactic-scale warfare as practice?" "It's worse than that," Nara replied, switching to another set of data. "Look at their industrial capacity during their major wars. When they decided to fight seriously, they converted their entire civilization to war production. Factories started making tanks. Civilian airports became military bases. Even their entertainment industry was turned into propaganda machines." The display showed production numbers that made the officers gasp. During their World War II, humans had produced over 250,000 aircraft, hundreds of thousands of tanks, and millions of weapons in just a few years. "Every major population center has weapons manufacturing capabilities," Nara explained. "Their entire economy can switch to war production within days. They don't just have soldiers, their whole population knows how to fight. They're not just warriors, Admiral. They're a species that has evolved to fight." The horrible truth was becoming clear. Captain Dae-ho spoke what everyone was thinking. "We haven't invaded a planet. We've attacked a weapon." Admiral Sung-woo felt a chill run down his spine as he processed the full implications. The Caltharian Empire had conquered hundreds of worlds, but they had never encountered anything like this. Most species fought when they had to, then returned to peaceful pursuits. Humans seemed to fight because they couldn't help themselves. "There's more," Nara said, her voice barely a whisper. "Our forces have been capturing some of their equipment, right? Well, they've been capturing ours too, and they're already adapting it." The display switched to show grainy surveillance footage from the planet's surface. In underground facilities that the Caltharians hadn't even known existed, human engineers were working on captured Imperial weapons. But they weren't just studying them, they were improving them. This footage is from 6 hours ago, Nara explained. They've already figured out how our energy weapons work. They're rebuilding them with their own components, making them more efficient, more powerful. One image showed a human soldier carrying what looked like a Caltharian plasma rifle, but modified with additional components and a larger power source. Another showed human technicians installing Imperial shield generators on their own vehicles. The planet's defensive systems are coming online too, Nara continued. Facilities that have been dormant for decades are suddenly activating. It's like they built their entire infrastructure expecting someone to invade them someday. Admiral Sung-Woo watched as the display showed massive underground complexes powering up, weapon systems emerging from hidden positions, and communication networks that spanned the entire planet becoming active. They've been waiting for us, he realized. Not us specifically, but someone like us. They've spent thousands of years preparing for a war with an advanced civilization. The command center was quiet, except for the steady stream of reports from the surface. Every update brought news of more casualties, more equipment lost, more positions overrun by human forces that fought with a ferocity and coordination that defied explanation. "Sir," came a voice from the communication station, "we're getting reports that the humans are launching counterattacks. They're not just defending anymore, they're going on the offensive." Admiral Sung-Woo looked at the tactical display showing his forces scattered across the planet's surface, taking casualties at an unprecedented rate. Then he looked at the historical timeline, showing 10,000 years of continuous warfare, and finally at the industrial capacity numbers that suggested an entire planet that could be converted into a war machine within days. For the first time in his 40-year military career, Admiral Sung-Woo was afraid. The Caltharian Empire had awakened something that was better left sleeping. The transformation began within hours of the first alien dropships hitting Earth's surface. Commander Yoon Seo sat in the communications center of the flagship Dominator, her headset crackling with intercepted human transmissions from around the planet. What she was hearing defied everything the Caltharian Empire knew about primitive civilizations. "Admiral," she called out, her voice tight with disbelief, "you need to hear this. The humans are coordinating on a global scale." Admiral Sung-Woo approached her station, still trying to process the casualty reports flooding in from the surface. His invasion force was being systematically destroyed by what should have been an easy target. "Play it," he ordered. The speakers filled with human voices speaking in dozens of different languages, but the message was clear even through the translation computers. Military commanders from nations that had been enemies just days before were now sharing intelligence, coordinating attacks and pooling their resources. "This is impossible," Sung-Woo muttered. "Our intelligence showed these humans were divided into competing factions. Some of them were literally pointing nuclear weapons at each other." "Not anymore," Yoon Seo replied, switching between communication channels. "Listen to this. Nations that were threatening each other with nuclear weapons yesterday are now sharing military resources. They're sending troops across borders to help each other. It's unprecedented." The display showed global communication networks lighting up like a neural system, with information flowing between military bases, government centers, and civilian populations at speeds that suggested a level of cooperation the Caltharians had never seen before. 3,000 miles below the alien fleet in the depths of the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Yoon Young worked in a facility that officially didn't exist. The underground complex had been built during the Cold War, designed to survive nuclear attacks and continue scientific research even after civilization collapsed. Now, it was serving a purpose its builders had never imagined. "Hand me that power." "Coupling," she said to her assistant, Dr. Kim, as they worked on a strange hybrid device that combined human engineering with alien technology. Around them, dozens of other scientists and engineers worked at similar stations, all focused on the same goal: reverse engineering Caltharian weapons and making them better. "Are you sure this will work?" Kim asked, watching as Yoon Young connected. "Ted a captured alien energy cell to a human-built targeting system. The alien's mistake," Yoon Young explained, not looking up from her work, "was thinking we were primitive. We're not primitive. We're experienced. We've been building weapons for 10,000 years. They've been building them to fight farmers and merchants. There's a difference. The device in her hands hummed to life, its improvised components somehow working together despite being built by two completely different civilizations. The human additions made the alien weapon more accurate, more powerful, and easier to manufacture with Earth's industrial capacity. "Test it," she ordered. The weapon fired a beam of energy that punched through 3 feet of reinforced steel like it was paper. But unlike the original alien version, this one could be built in any major factory on Earth using materials that humans had been working with for decades. Similar scenes were playing out in hidden facilities around the world. In abandoned mines, old subway tunnels and forgotten military bunkers, human engineers worked with desperate creativity to turn captured alien technology into something they could use. The first human counterattack came at dawn on the 4th day of the invasion. Admiral Sung-woo was in his command chair reviewing casualty reports and trying to figure out how a primitive planet had managed to destroy nearly half his invasion force when the proximity alarm started screaming. "Incoming." "Contacts!" shouted Lieutenant Tae-min from the sensor station. "Multiple aircraft rising from the planet's surface." Sung-woo looked at the tactical display, expecting to see the crude chemical-powered aircraft that human militaries had been using. Instead, he saw something that made his blood run cold. The human aircraft were glowing with energy signatures that matched Caltharian technology, but they moved with flight patterns that were purely human. They approached in formations that seemed random, but were actually carefully coordinated to create overlapping fields of fire. "Those aren't their original aircraft," Tae-min said, his voice rising with panic. "They've modified them. They're using our own power sources against us." The human attack was unlike anything in Caltharian military experience. Instead of the straightforward assault tactics that most species used, the humans employed strategies that seemed to have been designed by someone who had spent centuries thinking about how to fight a superior enemy. Some of the human aircraft flew direct attack runs, drawing fire from the Caltharian ships. Others approached from unexpected angles, using the planet's gravity and atmosphere to mask their approach. Still others seemed to be running away, only to suddenly reverse course and attack from behind. "Sir, they're not fighting like any species. We've encountered," Tae-min reported as he watched 3 more Caltharian cruisers explode under the coordinated assault. "They're using strategies we've never seen. Some of these attack patterns, they're using our own ships as cover." Because they've had to invent them, Admiral Sung-woo realized with growing horror. They've spent millennia fighting themselves. They know every possible way to kill, defend, and survive, because they've tried them all. The human aircraft weren't just attacking, they were learning. Each wave of attackers used slightly different tactics, adapting to Caltharian countermeasures. In real time. When the Imperial ships tried to retreat to higher orbit, the humans followed them. When they tried to use their superior firepower, the humans scattered and attacked from multiple directions at once. Down on the planet's surface, Lieutenant Colonel Jae-sung was witnessing something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Underground bunkers that his forces had thought were empty were opening up, revealing weapons stockpiles that dwarfed entire Imperial armories. "Command, this is Ground Team Alpha," he reported, his voice shaking as he watched humans emerge from hidden facilities carrying weapons that looked like they belonged in a science fiction movie. "The enemy has equipment we never detected. They've got enough firepower down here to fight a galactic war." The humans weren't just using the weapons they had captured and modified, they were also bringing out stockpiles that suggested they had been preparing for exactly this scenario for decades. Vehicles that looked like they were designed to fight alien invaders, weapons that seemed specifically built to counter energy shields, and communication equipment that could coordinate attacks across entire continents. "How long have they been preparing for this?" Jae-sung wondered aloud, as he watched a human tank destroy one of his armored vehicles with a single shot from a weapon that definitely hadn't existed a week ago. The answer was becoming terrifyingly clear. The humans hadn't just been fighting each other for thousands of years, they had been preparing for someone else to join the fight. Every war, every conflict, every technological advancement had been practice for this moment. And now that moment had arrived. The humans were showing the galaxy exactly what 10,000 years of continuous warfare had taught them. They were showing the Caltharian Empire that they had made a terrible mistake. They hadn't invaded a primitive world. They had attacked a species that had turned warfare into an art form, and now that species was fighting back with everything. They had learned. The evacuation order came at 3:47 hours, Galactic Standard Time. Admiral Sung Woo stood on the bridge of his flagship Dominator, watching the tactical display show the systematic destruction of the Caltharian Empire's most powerful invasion fleet. Red warning lights bathed the command center as damage reports flooded in from across the armada. "Sir, the Thunderstrike is gone," reported Lieutenant Taemin, his voice hollow with shock. "Direct hit from one of their new weapons. The entire ship just vaporized." Through the main viewport, Sungwoo could see the blue-green planet that had become their nightmare. Earth hung in space like a jewel, but now he knew the truth. It was a jewel with teeth. Human spacecraft, built with impossible speed using captured Caltharian technology, swarmed around his retreating fleet like angry insects. "All ships, emergency jump to hyperspace," Sungwoo commanded. "Retreat vector 77 Alpha." But even as his fleet prepared to flee, the humans weren't finished with them. The pursuing Earthships moved with tactics that defied everything the Caltharians knew about space combat. Instead of the predictable attack patterns most species used, the humans employed strategies that seemed designed by minds that had spent centuries thinking about how to kill efficiently. "They're not letting us go," called out Navigator Kyung-soo from his station. "Sir, they're following us into hyperspace." This should have been impossible. The humans had barely achieved spaceflight according to Imperial intelligence, yet somehow they had not only copied Caltharian faster-than-light technology, but improved it. Their ships could match Imperial vessels, speed for speed, while carrying weapons that hit harder than anything in the Caltharian arsenal. The running battle continued for 3 hours as the remnants of the invasion fleet limped away from Earth. Human ships harassed them at every turn, picking off damaged vessels and preventing the Caltharians from regrouping. It was like being hunted by predators who had studied their prey for years. Finally, after losing 2 more cruisers to human pursuit craft, the Caltharian fleet managed to put enough distance between themselves and Earth to stop and assess the damage. Admiral Sungwoo called for a full damage report, though he already knew it would be devastating. "Damage report," he commanded, his voice barely above a whisper. Captain Dae-ho, his uniform torn and his face streaked with soot from a console explosion, consulted his tactical pad with shaking hands. 60% of the fleet destroyed or disabled, sir. We've lost over 400 ships and nearly 2 million personnel. The humans are—" He paused, struggling to find words. "They're learning faster than we can adapt." The bridge fell silent, except for the hum of damaged systems and the distant sound of repair crews working frantically to keep the flagship functional. Sung Woo had commanded fleets that conquered entire star systems, but he had never experienced a defeat like this. "Sir," Communications Officer Hyojin called out, her voice tight with surprise, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth, long-range, directed specifically at our fleet. And, sir, it's in our language." Sung Woo felt his blood run cold. The humans shouldn't have been able to crack Caltharian communication protocols, let alone learn their language well enough to speak it fluently. Yet somehow, in the space of just 7 days, they had accomplished both. "Put it on the main screen," he ordered. The display flickered to life, showing a human military leader standing in what appeared to be an underground command bunker. The man wore a simple uniform, but his bearing suggested someone accustomed to command. Behind him, Sung-woo could see technicians working on clearly Caltharian technology, but they weren't just studying it. They were rebuilding it into something new. "This is General Park of the United Earth Defense Force," the human said, his voice calm and measured. His pronunciation of Caltharian words was perfect, which should have been impossible. "Your invasion has been repelled. We suggest you inform your empire that Earth is no longer a target. It's a threat." The human general gestured to the activity behind him, where Sung-woo could see captured Imperial weapons being integrated into human systems. But more disturbing were the glimpses of human engineers working on spacecraft designs that looked far more advanced than anything Earth should have been capable of building. "We thank you for the technology transfer," General Park continued with what might have been a slight smile. Your weapons and ships have been very educational. We're already building improved versions. The transmission ended, but the message was crystal clear. Earth hadn't just survived the invasion, it had been awakened. The planet that the Empire had dismissed as a primitive backwater was now actively preparing for war on a galactic scale as the remnants of the Caltharian fleet limped back toward Imperial space. Admiral Sungwoo found himself facing the most difficult task of his career, writing the report that would explain this disaster to High Command. How could he tell them that the Empire's mightiest fleet had been defeated not by another galactic power, but by a single planet that had turned warfare into an art form? He sat in his private quarters, staring at a blank report screen, trying to find words for what had happened. How could he explain that they hadn't just attacked a planet, but had accidentally triggered the activation of a war machine that had been 10,000 years in the making? The humans had taken everything the Caltharians had thrown at them and turned it into a learning experience. Every weapon captured, every ship destroyed, every tactical move observed, all of it had been absorbed and improved upon with a speed that defied belief. 3 months later, long-range sensors detected the first human ships leaving Earth's solar system. They weren't exploration vessels or peaceful traders. They were warships, built with a combination of human engineering and captured Caltharian technology, heading toward the nearest Imperial outposts. The scout reports that followed painted a picture that sent shockwaves through the Imperial High Command. The humans weren't content to defend their homeworld. They were going on the offensive. Their ships moved in formations that Imperial tacticians couldn't predict, using strategies that seemed to anticipate every possible countermove. Within 6 months, 3 Imperial border worlds had fallen to human forces. The attackers didn't just conquer. They studied, learned, and adapted every piece of technology they encountered. Each victory made them stronger, smarter, and more dangerous. The Caltharian Empire, which had dominated this section of the galaxy for over 1,000 years, suddenly found itself facing an enemy that fought like no one they had ever encountered. An enemy that had spent millennia preparing for exactly this kind of war. In the depths of space, construction continued on massive human shipyards, their frameworks stretching for kilometers as Earth's industrial capacity turned toward a single goal, taking their warfare to the stars. The planet that had once seemed so peaceful and primitive was revealing its true nature. Earth hadn't just survived first contact with a galactic empire. It had declared war on the galaxy itself, and the galaxy was about to learn why humans had never stopped fighting each other. They had been practicing for something bigger. The end